Ladies, if your Bible turn to Exodus, we're starting in Exodus 15 tonight, going through the life of Moses. We call the series "The Promise of God's Presence" because that was what carried Moses through that assurance, that promise that God had given him. I will be with you. And not only did God give him that promise, He gave him that evidence. And from this point out, from what we saw last week, when they were by the Red Sea, right before they crossed the Red Sea, from this point on, they are they have the visible presence of God through a pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night that leads them and directs them where to go. One of the most intriguing miracles in the Bible to me is what we looked at last week, the parting of the Red Sea. Some of the other miracles, you can kind of get a visual of what it looked like or how it kind of went down. But the parting of the Red Sea is so foreign to anything that is in the natural world, anything that we would see, that I'm intrigued by it because it's like, how'd that go down? What did that look like? What was it like to be one of the Israelites? The first part of Exodus 15 is this huge celebration. It's a song that Moses wrote that all the Israelites sang in celebration of God's deliverance of them. And in that song, in that celebration, in that time of worship, they celebrated God's power, and they celebrated His loving kindness and His eternal reign and His strength and His deliverance of them, and how He wiped out their enemy, completely removed that enemy that was out to get them. God loved them, and they expressed that. They knew that. God was protecting them, and they saw that. Quite literally, there was no way out of the situation they were in from their perspective, and God provided a way. And so they celebrated that. But here's what we're going to see tonight, is that just because God delivers you through one hardship, in their case it was the Red Sea, doesn't mean there's not another trial, not another challenge, not another adversity coming. Because there is. We will have more hardships, and we will have more challenges. It's not the end of it just because we have one huge victory. That's one huge step in our walk with God. But what do we do with that? How do we respond to that? What do we learn from that? How do we move forward into the next phase of our life that will bring completely different challenges? In James 1, the Bible tells us that we will have trials. It doesn't say if you have trials. It says when you encounter various trials. And that word various there, it means multicolored. Okay, have you ever gone somewhere and tried to pick out paint? You're like, I want some white paint. They bring out a book of colors of white paint. Okay, and let's go something simple. Let's go blue. Okay, pages and pages and pages of blue. There are so many different colors, right? So many different colors. There are so many different kinds of trials we'll face in your life, is what James tells us. They're going to come in all different kinds of directions and all different kinds of things, but I love, we just recently went through 2 Peter, but in 1 Peter, Peter tells the recipients that there are trials that are multicolored, they're various. God's grace is just as diverse. That exact same word for multicolored. Every color that you can possibly imagine is how your trials will come. God's grace is every bit of that more. You can color. Why am I nuts for a second? So tonight what we're going to see is they didn't have just another trial come. They had 3 back-to-back trials come right after the events at the Red Sea. And they were, and these were real trials. They weren't just, oh, I'm tired, my legs are sore from walking. No, these were real trials. These were crucial items for life. They were missing. They didn't have drinkable water. They didn't have food. Those are some crucial things for life. Okay, so we're not talking about just an first world problems. These are real issues, kind of thing going on for them. So God uses these circumstances though as a teaching tool. And that's kind of what we're going to see tonight is how God teaches us through these times. So the first thing we're going to look at is these three different trials, and I just want to read through them real quickly and kind of hit the highlights of them. So there are three trials. The first one was they came to a place that had bitter water. Bitter water. So let's look at Exodus 15. I'm going to start reading in verse 22. Excuse me. Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. For therefore it was named Marah, which means that's the name. So the people grumbled at Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" Verse 25. Then he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, and he threw it into the waters, and the waters became sweet. There he made for them a statute and a regulation, and there he tested them. So this is 3 days, it tells us, 3 days after the Red Sea. How long does a miracle have impact on your life? How long does the hand of God directly intervening in your life have impact? For the Israelites, they had about a 3-day window. Okay? That was, after 3 days, they were like, God, we trusted you for that, but we're done with that. We've moved on. Now, what's their response? They're grumbling. But what did God do? He took undrinkable water, unusable water, and made it usable, made it sweet. And he essentially, it tells us here that God is the one who heals. And he healed, just like he healed the water, he can heal food. So God took that bitter water and made it sweet. Second trial they faced was a lack of food. Okay? That would probably get most of us upset too. Lack of food. Jump over to Exodus 16. I'm going to start reading in verse 2. I'm going to read verses 2 and 3 here. The whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, does that sound familiar, in the wilderness. The sons of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died in the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger." That's a pretty big accusation against Moses, right? You schemed up this whole escape plan so you can watch us all starve to death here. All right? Okay. Look how bad their memories are. Look how bad their memories. How do they remember Egypt in this moment? Not very long after they just left. We would sit, and there would just be pots of meat next to everybody, and we would just eat meat for our heart's content. There were unlimited breadsticks, and we would just order more, and they would show up, and we would just have all the food we wanted. Egypt was so great. I miss it so much. What? You remember where you were a week ago? You remember what was happening? This is not that long after they left. In Exodus 1, Exodus 3, we read that they were forced into hard labor. They were treated harshly. They cried out to God because their taskmasters were so wicked. But they have selective memory. In the midst of this trial, their memory fails them. And they look back on that as the good old days. Boy, life was so much better when I was a slave and someone was eating that make enough bricks. Man, life was so much better when I was there because I remember it as just this awesome place where I had him. And Moses, what did he brought? That's how they handled the second trial. Let's jump down to verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. On the sixth day, when they prepare, what they shall bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, At evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning, you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your grumbling against the Lord. And what are we that you should grumble against us? So what's God doing in this moment where they have no food? They're accusing Moses of trying to starve them to death. God said, I'm going to give you endless bread. I'm going to rain down bread every single morning, and it will just be laying on the ground for you to go pick up. And you will gather enough for your family for the day. Don't gather any more than that. Anybody know why? It'll go bad. It'll turn rotten. It'll be horrible. Okay? You don't want to mess with that. What's the problem with gathering too much for a day? What's God trying to draw out of them? Trust. That's not good. Do I trust that God's going to provide for me? God just provided for me this morning. Do I trust that He will provide for me? Do I trust that He will come through again, or is this a one-time thing? How much faith do I really have in God? Am I willing to live a life of trust, or do I have moments of trust? That's the quandary that God was putting them in here. I want you to live a life of trust. I want your lifestyle to wake up every morning confident that God is going to take care of your need. I want you to wake up every morning confident that that bread is going to be there. So when you don't trust Him, you'll see that everything turns south. It goes bad. In the evening, God will provide for them quail. I was thinking about this. I'm like, 2 million people in the middle of the desert. How many semi-truck loads of food would it take for one meal for all those people? I mean, you think about logistics. Like military. They have troops, places, and they have to figure out how to keep the supply lines going and stuff like that. Did you say 2 million? 2 million. I know. Well, no. From a human perspective, though. But if they were trying to provide food on their own, okay, there's no.
Also, we got to decrease the surplus population.
There's no nowhere to go get groceries or anything like that, right? So they're just from a human perspective, how much food would it take? How much? Is that trainloads of food? Is that truckloads of food? What is it? And every meal, God said, "I've got you covered," and He covered them for the next 40 years every meal.
I think it's important. I noticed that they were all complaining, saying, "Like, you brought us out to get the pillows." Moses and Aaron looked around and said, they didn't try to defend themselves. They just said that the Lord brought them out.
Yep.
Verse 6.
Yeah, we're right where God wants us, right? This is kind of what they were saying, right? Yeah. This wasn't my idea. We're here because God brought us here. And God never leads you somewhere that He doesn't provide. You might run into circumstances in your life where God is not providing for you and God is not meeting your needs. Maybe that's because you're somewhere God didn't want you to be. Maybe that's because you've chased something down of your own doing that wasn't God's plan. And God's saying, I'm going to cut off your supply here because you're in the wrong place. You need to come back. You need to really back in. So, I do like that they put the emphasis back on we're exactly where God has called us to be. Okay, so they first have bitter water, then they had no food, And then they have no water at all. It's not like it's just bad water. There's no water. Jump down to chapter 17. In verse 1, it says, Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord. Okay, so why are they moving again? Because God is moving them. They're following God. They're following that pillar. They're following God's leading and direction. And they find that they have a lack in their life when they get there. What's the principle we just talked about? If God brought you somewhere, if God has you going in a certain direction, and we're not just talking about your physical location, but if God brings you to a ministry, if God brings you to a point in your life, He will provide for you. He will provide for you. So they went there according to the command of the Lord and camped at Refuge, and there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people said, "Oh, that's okay, we'll be good. I'm sure God will take care of it." No, they have not learned their lesson yet. Okay, therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and they grumbled against Moses and said, "Why now have you brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" Very cute. There's a great need they have, a very real need. Hot desert climate, no water. Okay? Who do they say they need water for? We need water for ourselves, for our children, for our livestock. We're all dependent on water, and there's none here. So they have a very legitimate need that they're expressing. There's nothing wrong with them expressing that need. But what we'll see is the problem is how and the attitude behind it. Come down to verse 6 of chapter 17. Behold, I will stand before you, and there on the rock, God's telling Moses this. Stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water will come out of it, that all the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he named the place Massah and Meribah, because of the quarrel of the sons of Israel, because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So they have no water. What does God do? He meets that need. He meets that need. God uses these three trials in their lives. These three different trials. He uses them to teach Israel some lessons. He uses them to help them learn some valuable truths. So let's look at those three. I pulled out three different truths that jump off the pages at me. Three different truths. The first one is a need in our life can quickly lead to bitterness. When there's a lack in our life, something missing, it can quickly turn to bitterness in our lives. Quickly turn to bitterness. There were three very real needs, very practical needs for survival. Okay, they weren't asking for new phones and new, just stuff. I want a new car, a new phone, and all the stuff, God. No, God, I'd like some food and some water because I have none. So they had a need, and God wants us to bring our needs and to bring our concerns to Him. God desires that. He longs for us to bring those needs to Him. A lot of times in the Psalms, the writer of the Psalm will cry out to God because they're overwhelmed, because their circumstances are beyond their ability to deal with. And they just can't get a handle on it. They're like, "God, I don't know which way is up." They feel like God has abandoned them. Write this down if you don't turn there. Psalm 142. Psalm 142. I want to take a look at how David, who wrote the psalm, addresses these concerns. How he brings up his concerns, because we have concerns and God wants us to bring those concerns to Him, And so that's what David does here. Look at Psalm 142. Verse 1 says, I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my troubles before him. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, you knew my path and in the way where I would walk. They have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me, and there is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. Do you hear the pain in those words? The anguish because of his circumstances. Have you ever been at that point in life? Have you ever been to that point where you're totally overwhelmed? There's an issue you can't solve. Others are out to get me. I'm totally abandoned. I'm on my own. There's no one beside me. No one coming to my side. No one coming to my rescue. And God, I don't even feel like I know that I can be sure that you're there. That's where David is. There is no escape. God, I'm a desperate man. I don't know what to do. I think we can all relate to that on some level. That's kind of the position the Israelites are in as well. God, there is no grocery store for us to run to grab some food. There's no way for us to get enough water. They have a very real need. They have no options. They feel abandoned. The issue, though, isn't expressing that need, that hurt, or that feeling of abandonment to God. That's not the issue, because we see here David did it, didn't he? He very desperately cried out to God. There is no one looking out for me. There's a trap for me. Every path I take, there's a trap set for me. I can't win. God, have you abandoned me too? Because no one is coming to my rescue. The issue isn't expressing your hurt or your grief. It's where do you go from there? Where do you go from there? Because what did Israel do at this point? They expressed their need. They had a desperate need. They felt abandoned. They expressed it, and then what? It didn't go well from there, did it? They didn't take it anywhere positive. They realized they had a desperate need, and that desperate need turned to bitterness. And it tells us multiple times that they grumbled. That word for grumble is a continual action that takes place. It's not a one-time, man, this stinks. Man, I'm thirsty. Dude, I'm hungry. It's not that. It's a continual, constant, nonstop, negative perspective, negative attitude, complaining, habitual griping, and the attitude that goes along with it. It's that negative perspective that won't stop. So they grumbled. What else did they do? Who did they attack? They attacked Moses, didn't they? Twice they accused him of trying to kill them. Twice they accused him of trying to kill them. Moses probably could have done. He killed the Egyptian dude. I mean, if he wanted to kill somebody, he knew how. Okay, he had done that before. He's got the staff that God has given him. That's like the sign of his power. Some amazing. The waters of the Red Sea part because of that. It turns into a snake. The waters of the Nile turn to blood. Now, you think if Moses wanted to kill you, he wouldn't have done that already? But they make these accusations against Moses, and by making an accusation against Moses, who is God's anointed one, they're making the accusation against God. God, you don't know what you're doing. What are you thinking? God. And then the last one, it tells them a couple times that they argued against Moses. They argued with Moses, and he's like, I'm renaming this place the place of petty arguments because y'all are petty, and you won't stop arguing. Israel turned bitter in the middle of the adversity of facing. In the New Testament, we read about, I mentioned earlier that James talks about trials in James chapter 1. That's an awesome passage. Talks about trials. The word for trials, when James talks about it, and that's what Israel's facing here. That's what David's facing in Psalm 142, trials. The word for trials is something that weighs down on you, presses on you, squeezes you. Feels like you're going to be crushed. That's the word for trials. Have you been in that situation? You feel like, I can't even catch my breath. I don't know what way is up. How you respond in that. It's interesting because in trials, you get squeezed, you get pressed. You take an orange and you squeeze it. What comes out? Orange juice, hopefully. Right? Whatever's on the inside will come out. If you crack an egg, what comes out? Hopefully a yolk and white. I cracked one. No, not. You don't want to crack those open. I cracked one open that was rotten. That's a memorable experience. It's like crack. Why is this greenish, yellow, and watery? It's disgusting smelling. I was just in shock for a minute. I stared at it. Mark's like, get it out. Gross. But whatever's on the inside comes out. Whatever is inside your heart, whatever's going on in your level of trust with God, that's what will come out when you face all these trials. But what's different about how Israel, let's compare Israel's response to trials, because I would say they have pretty weighty trials, right? 2 million people, no water. 2 million people, no food. David, his life is in danger. People are chasing him, trying to trap him, hunting him down like wild game. There's an army after him trying to kill him. So he has legitimate concerns. But there's two different responses to that. We've seen Israel's response. They accused Moses. They grumbled. They just attacked. But how does David respond? Psalm 142. Let me read the last half of this because it turns. It turns on a dime. He expresses his hurt. He expresses his despair. He expresses all that is so hurtful and so challenging in his life that's overwhelming. And then he says in verse 5, pick up right where I left off. I cried out to you, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry. What the heck? I don't know what this is. My phone started playing.
Somebody tell Brad so you count.
I took that off last week. I thought about it. I'm like, nah, it'll be. Okay.
What?
So, what was I saying? Oh, we were in Psalm 142. Okay, so how did David respond that was different? How did David respond? See, so he says, God, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. And how does he express this to God? I cry, I give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. Is that a different response than Israel gave? Polar opposites, huh? Polar opposites. The psalmist was going through that dark, difficult, impossible season. And he was being squeezed. But he expressed his dependence and reliance on God in the midst of all those circumstances, rather than lashing out. He was very frank with God about what his circumstances were. He was very honest with God about how he was feeling, but he immediately turned it and said, but God, you are my refuge. You are the one who will sustain me. You are the one who will deliver me. You are the one who will give me success in this. It's only because of you, God. What's in your heart? God will bring these things to your life to help you see what's in your heart. How do you respond? You have a trial. How do you respond when things come forward? So, first truth that we see is there's a need in our life to quickly turn into bitterness. Number two, God's faithful to provide. Do you see that theme kind of running through this passage in Exodus? That's pretty easy to see, right? God will provide. But look at God's goal as he's providing. We didn't read chapter 16, verse 12, but look at that verse there. He says, I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. He tells Moses, speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Why? And you shall know that I am the Lord your God. I want you to know that I am your God. I want you to know that I am your provider. I'm the one who sustains you. But he wants the provision to drive them to the provider. How many times does God give us something in our lives, and our focus turns off of God onto what he's given us? God's like, that's not what I want. I want them to see that I am the Lord. Think about all that Israel has just, in very, very recent history, experienced. They had this miraculous deliverance from Egypt. The plagues that overwhelmed Egypt and destroyed the economy and the nation of Egypt and didn't even touch them a few miles away. And God led them out, and they were backed into a corner, but God parted the Red Sea. When has that ever happened? God parted the Red Sea so that they could walk through. Then that next morning, as the sun is coming up, the waters of the Red Sea crashed down on the entire Egyptian army that was chasing them and destroyed every man, chariot, horse, everything. God delivered them from their enemy that was trying to destroy them. God provides water twice. God provides food for them miraculously. And he's going to do that every day for the next 40 years. God will supply all your needs. God will provide. He's faithful to provide because he's a faithful God. So we see that theme, and that's kind of the most basic truth here is they had a need and God met it. But there's one more aspect of this that goes just a little deeper than that. I want to make sure we don't miss. And the third thing is that God tests us. He tests us for our good. He tests us so that we can grow. When God tests us in our lives, it's never a trap to try to get us to fail. It's never anything that will lead us to make a sinful decision. It's never anything that God has set us up for failure. That's not that's not what God's doing when He tests us. Let me read the passage I referred to a couple minutes ago in James chapter 1. I'm going to read 3 verses from that. These might be familiar to you. But James is talking about this, and he starts off, James, with this thought. He says, hey, y'all, and then he starts in. Okay, that's basically how he starts. He says, hey, guys, how you doing? Good to see you tonight. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. That's how he starts the letter. Well, nice to talk to you too, James. You're going to encounter trials, and they're going to be terrible. But I want you to consider it all joy. That's his opening. Consider it joy, my brother, when you encounter various trials. Then he gives the why. Trials, joy. That's not a formula that we're used to. Trials equal joy. Why? Verse 3. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And endurance let endurance have its perfect results, so that you may be perfect and complete. Now, perfect doesn't mean perfect like, everyone will be like, wow. No, it means mature. It means you've grown up in your faith. Okay? So that you will be mature, that you'll be grown up. That's what perfect is. So that you'll be mature, perfect, and complete, lacking in nothing. Because if you know how to respond to trials, you're not going to have the heartache that so many others have in life. And you will have joy because you will see a trial coming and you're like, okay, this is going to be difficult, but I can see God. This is going to be difficult, but I'm going to learn something new about God. I have no clue what it's going to be. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging, but I'm going to come out on the other side of this closer. Okay, bring it on. I can take this because I need to know more. Back in Exodus, we're not to this passage yet, but in Exodus chapter 20, look at the perspective he gives on trials. Right after he gives the Ten Commandments to Moses, verse 20 of chapter 20 in Exodus, Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you. So why does God test us? Here's what Moses told these same Israelites. God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of Him may remain with you, so that you may not sin. God, why does God allow trials? Why does God allow tests into our life? Why does God bring that kind of stuff? So that you can fear God, make you more holy. Testing brings maturity. Testing brings a right view of God. Those trials change how we see God and how we respond to Him and our faith in Him. Every time we face a trial, every time you face a test, a challenge in your life, something that is overwhelming in your life, God's teaching us and growing us. Those are times for us to pay attention to what God's doing. I had a pastor who was a mentor of mine. He said this all the time. He said, God never wastes circumstances. God, there hasn't been a circumstance in your life that God isn't going to use to help you grow. He will take it all. Never waste circumstances. Think of some of the trials that you face in your life. Think of some of the challenging moments in your life, a season of your life that you're like, I don't know how this works out on the other end. I have no clue where this is going. I hope you come through that with a stronger faith rather than a more bitter. If you have some things that you probably learned, have any of y'all learned that I'm not sufficient? I'm not enough to get myself through everything that I'm going to face. Have any of y'all learned I can't get myself out of some situations? How God uses those circumstances to draw us and to drive us to Himself. Some of you have come away maybe with the perspective, I am desperate and on God every moment of every day because I can't on my own. Israel had the opportunity to learn about themselves. They had the opportunity to learn about God. Let's look at some things they could learn about themselves. They learned just how selfish they were. They were very self-focused, me. They learned, or they had the opportunity to learn anyway, that they were walking by sight, not by faith. If I can't see it, I don't know that God's going to do it. If I don't see a way out, there must not be a way out. They put themselves kind of on par with God, right? Clearly, there's no way for God to get me out of this if I don't see an option. Wouldn't you hope that would kind of go away at some point? After he parted the Red Sea, after he turned, Moses throws a tree into the water and it becomes sweet. Some people are like, it was a special kind of tree, and the chemicals from that diluted and interacted with the bitter water, and they made it sweet. No, God took a tree, piece of wood that Moses threw into the water, and God changed the water to make it sweet. God provided the bread that landed on the ground every week. God provided the quail that were there ready for them to grab. God used that rock to flow out water for enough for all of them. For them, their children, their livestock. They were walking by what they could see, not what God could. They didn't have to. And then thirdly, they were never satisfied. Sometimes it's harder to take away these kinds of lessons about what we learn about ourselves. We like to turn our attention to God. We like to turn our attention to, man, God's so good, but it's really important for us to learn. What did I learn about that moment? How does God want to change me? How does He want to use those circumstances to change how I interact? But they also had a chance not only to learn about themselves, they had a chance to learn about God, which is which is very important as well. 3 things that were very obvious that they learned about God. He's aware of our needs. God knows our needs. Doesn't mean we don't tell Him our needs. Doesn't mean we don't express them to Him. But He knows them. It's not a surprise to Him. God, I have this need in my life. And God's like, oh, what? I have no idea. Thank you for telling me. God knows. He knows our need. He's able to meet our need. How much more clearly can we see that than in some of these encounters that the Israelites have with God in the wilderness? The cool thing is, He already knows how He's going to provide for our need. You believe that? You have faith in that? You trust that? Because God knows the outcome of this trial that you're in, this next trial that you're going to be going into. God knows the outcome of it already. He knows how it's going to work out. He knows how He's going to provide for you, deliver you, bring you through it, carry you through. He knows what He's going to do in that situation already. Just because you don't, just go along for the ride. Trust God. Trust God in that moment. Because He already knows how He's going to provide. I'm thinking of the bitter water. I've read this kind of perspective on it a couple times. God knew how He was going to solve that problem because He led them there, where it was. He led them to where it didn't catch God by surprise that the water was bitter. I can just see God dozens, years and years and years and years before any of this happened. Look at that seed there. Starting to sprout up. I think I'll leave this out. That'll be the one. God knows what's going on. It doesn't catch Him by surprise. So, if God knows what's happening, God knows the way out, God knows the end of the story, can that change your perspective on Him? It momentarily did. We see glimpses of that in Israel. Probably see glimpses of that in our own lives. But can that change how we interact? How we trust God? These are the same truths that we should be walking. Not trying to. And it is not really true in our circumstances. No, we pretty much focus on ourselves. We walk by sight, not by faith. We're very hard to satisfy. But God, He already knows what He's going to do. Next set of circumstances. God's given us this passage. One reason, so that we can learn from Israel's stories. So that we can grow and we can say, okay, I see how God provided. I see how God's at work. I see God's character, and that applies to my life. We have a choice. Every time you face a challenge, a circumstance, you can respond like Israel. You can grumble, you can complain, you can get bitter, you can attack, you can accuse, or you can respond like David. God, I don't know. I have no idea what's going on. But I trust. I trust you. That's not going to stop. I choose. I choose to trust you. Never will waste circumstances in life, difficult circumstances, or what will drive them. Israelites don't know it, but they have another 40 years ahead of them in the wilderness of trials and challenges. Probably a good thing they didn't know it at this point, don't you think? Would you want to know that? You know how hard it's been the last couple of weeks? We got 39 years of that, by the way. It's going to be hard. God brings you into something. That's how we do. This week I got two things for you. First one, realize that every trial is an opportunity for you to become bitter or predetermined out. You have a choice to make. You have a decision to make in that moment. Am I going to become bitter? Am I going to shake my fist at God? Am I going to accuse? Am I going to argue? Am I going to fight? Or am I going to cry out to God and say, God, I don't know what you're up to, but I trust. It's a decision that you have in that moment. In that trial that you're facing now, some of you are going through something that's overwhelming. Choose bitterness or choose to trust God. Make a decision. Are you going to waste the circumstances God brings to your life? Are you going to let them go to waste? Second thing I got for you is read Psalm 142. It's a psalm I went through tonight. I want to challenge you to read it several times this next week and look at it And look how David goes from expressing his despair, expressing his concern, to expressing his faith in God. And those things can go together. Your life doesn't have to be peachy and rosy for you to be able to say, God, I trust you. God, I put my faith in you. God, my hope is in you. That's not just when times are rough. That's especially when times are overwhelming. I want to challenge you to do a case study, Psalm 142, and just dig into that. What did David do? What was going on? What's he expressing in the first part of this, and what's he expressing in the second? Let's pray together. God, thank you that you are powerful. Thank you that you're a God who provides. You're a God who heals. You're a God who is faithful. You're a God who we can turn to continually. There has never been a promise you made that you haven't. So God, we celebrate that. God, we see so much. Amen.